Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tsung-Ren Huang from the Department of Psychology and also the Center of AI and Advanced Robotics at National Taiwan University. And today I plan to spend 30 minutes to quickly walk through some of our recent studies regarding verbal and nonverbal communication in human-robot interaction. And this topic is important because different kinds of robots are popping up around us. They can assist us at restaurants or at home. They can also accompany children as well as the elderly. And in all of these scenarios, humans and robots may need to communicate verbally or non-verbally. And we'll discuss 3 psychological topics in this human-robot communication, specifically regarding memory, personality, and emotion. And if no one objects to this talk plan, let's get started with the first topic. So the first topic is about memory. So let's imagine in the future, you have a companion robot at home, like a family member, or at the office, like a colleague. And so basically, you and the robot have a shared reality and or collective memory about your shared life. As a result, we may sometimes ask the robot about our shared reality, like, do you remember what he said from yesterday? Or something like this, because you have shared life experiences and our memory is not perfect, so we just ask the robot. Unfortunately, although a robot as a computer has a perfect memory, its speech recognition isn't perfect, especially in a noisy environment. So in consequence, the robot may provide incorrect information out of its memory, and such a possibility leads to our following research questions. Does misinformation or disinformation provided by conversational agents become our false memory? And if this is the case, can we prevent humans from suffering such a social contagion of false memory? And the answer to this question lies in the title of our recent article, which is Unavoidable Social Contagion of False Memory from Robots to Humans. So here is the overview of this study. Basically, we adapt the social contagion of memory paradigm from human-human interaction to human-robot interaction. And in this particular paradigm, consists of 3 stages. In the first stage, a participant needs to remember some study materials. In the second stage, the collaborative recall stage, the participant then talk with a human confederate who then intentionally supply some unstudied information or false information. And in the third stage, the participant then takes a memory recall test to see if this participant will falsely recognize unstudied information as all information. I don't know if this makes sense to you, but imagine that, just take a car accident as an example. In a court, maybe some witness, maybe some witnesses would kind of report what they had seen or had heard in the car accident. And because people confabulate, so some misinformation may spread from one person to another person. And if this is the case, and if this happens, we call this the social contagion of false memory from the human confederate to another person. And basically in our study, we just changed the human confederate into a robot confederate. And specifically, we also have 3 stages. In the first stage, and these memory materials are category exemplars, like sport swimming or the pair of sport biologies. And these pairs, these memory materials, were verbally announced to a participant such that a human or a robot confederate can overhear these memory materials. And in this particular stage, the purpose of this stage was to create a shared reality between the participants and the confederate. And 2 days later, on day 3, the participant and the confederate exchange information with each other about what they had heard on day 1. And in this particular stage, we had different kinds of experimental manipulations in a between subjects design. So in study 1, the confederate could either be a human or be a robot. And in study 2, and because in study 1, we have found the social contagion of false memory from the confederate to participant. So in study 2, we try to prevent this from happening. And there are 3 between subject conditions. In 2A, it's basically a replication of, the 2A is basically a replication of 1B, just to check if this effect is robust or not. And more interestingly, in 2B, the robot provides one-time warning before the whole kind of conversation session. So the robot said that, okay, don't believe everything I say, because later I may provide some incorrect information. But this warning was just provided once before the whole conversation session or stage 2. And in the 2C condition, the robot provides an item-specific warning about its supply misinformation. So whenever it's gonna provide misinformation, 50% of the time, it will say something like, okay, I'm not very sure about what I'm going to say, but I believe what I heard on day 1 was blah, blah, blah. Something like this. But 50% of the time, it did not provide such a warning, such that we can have a within subject comparison about the warning effect to see if the warning is item-specific warning was effective or not. And after this second stage, we follow up with the individual recall stage just to see how much the participant misremember the incorrect information. And here are the results from study 1. And basically, we try to quantify the misinformation induced false alarm rate. So false alarm here means that, so basically you can, false alarm rate here means that how many misleading items supplied by the robot have been recognized by the participant as correct information. So this is called false alarm. And here, the memory materials or the items could either be typical or atypical exemplars of a category. But regardless of the typicality, we saw a very strong kind of false alarm rate for the misinformation supplied by the robot. For the human-human interaction, and also for the human-robot interaction. And then if we check the effect size between these two between subject conditions, you can see the effect size are comparable between the in human-human interaction as well, and also in the human-robot interactions. And in study 2, we replicate this effect or this phenomena by 2A. So 2A is was identical to 1B or previously. And more interestingly, when the robot supply a one-time item non-specific warning, the false alarm rate did not reduce at all. So it was ineffective. The warning was ineffective. And also remember that in 2C, we actually had within subject conditions. One is that the robot skip item-specific warning 50% of the time. And then 50% of the time, it had provide the item-specific warning. However, these two conditions did not differ in terms of their kind of false alarm rate. So this item-specific warning wasn't effective either. Yeah, so back to our research questions, does misinformation or disinformation provided by conversational agents become our false memory? And yes, 77% of the misinformation would become our false memory to further guide our behavior. And for the second questions, not really, we cannot prevent such social contagion of false memory to happen. And let's switch gears to another topic about personality. So I don't know if you have seen this movie in 2021 called Wrong's Gone Wrong, But in either case, this is a scene from the movie. And where in this particular scene, so the boy tries to teach the robot about everything about himself. And then check out the post-it stickers on the wall. There are tons of it. And it took a lot of time for the boy to teach the robot about its own personal information, like height and preference and all kinds of things. And so this then begs the question that if we try to develop super intelligent systems or robots, and then who can understand us very well, and then to provide some personalized services, then how can a robot efficiently understand a user without going through those kind of post-it stickers? And the answer to this question from psychology is to use all kinds of psychological tests, right? Like IQ, if you want to know the cognitive abilities of another person, you just deliver an IQ test to the person. Or if you want to know his or her personality, just deliver a personality test. But it will be quite silly to do so, right? For a robot to hand out a questionnaire to a user, say, okay, just fill out this questionnaire so that I can understand you better. Or verbally for the robot to administer this test to a user. Moreover, these psychological studies have the so-called observer effect, which means that whenever a user is aware of being observed, his or her behavior or responses will become unnatural or become biased. So how do we, so if we want to have a kind of personalized robot, how can we solve these two questions simultaneously simultaneously solve these two questions to create personalized robots? And one possible solution is shown by the title of our article, which is to asynchronously embed psychological test questions into human-robot conversations for user understanding or user profiling. What does this mean? The idea is actually very simple. So what we did was to take 10 questions from a short personality test called TP. And the robot asks these questions whenever appropriate. For example, this is the 10 items, the 10 test questions of personality in this particular questionnaire. So for example, when users say, I kept silent at the party last night, the word silent would trigger, because it's semantically similar to quiet. So it would trigger the robot to ask the following question. The robot would say, okay, are you generally a reserved, quiet person or not? So basically this question was taken from this particular questionnaire. And then the robot asked this question to the user. And because usually in a paper and pencil paper-based questionnaire, a user or a participant usually need to kind of see all the questions at once and then fill out all the questions at once. So the test was delivered synchronously. And here the idea is that we can, we can kind of break a particular questionnaire and take different questions and then kind of spread out into the conversation. And so that we can later collect responses from about these questions and then do the scoring later. So this is what we call kind of asynchronous testing. And but the idea, although the idea sounds good and interesting, and also it can kind of solve the two questions simultaneously, because right now this kind of test, it is not tedious at all because it's not very lengthy, at least to participants or to users. And at the same time, the user doesn't feel that's being observed at all, right? Because it's just like a very casual kind of conversation or interaction with the robot. So it doesn't feel to be tested at all. And with this kind of information, then, so for example, these questions measures the levels of whether the participant or the user is an extrovert or introvert. And if the user is an introvert, then probably the robot wants to keep a personal distance from each other so that the user will feel more comfortable. And the idea sounds very interesting, but we need to validate it. So the validation goes like this. Basically, we compare the results of the verbal version and the written version from the same participants on this particular TP personality questionnaire. And then we can see a very, very high correlation between these two versions of the test. So which means that, okay, no matter you synchronously or asynchronously test this, administer this test, it doesn't matter. The results are very similar to each other, at least for the young people, young participants. Unfortunately, the results or the consistency between these two versions were not very good for the elderly. And the reason is because whenever the elderly miss out on something, they could always go back in the paper and pencil version. So they can just look back and then, oh, okay, so this is what do you mean? But they cannot do so in a human-robot conversation. When a robot just ask a question, but when the elderly didn't hear very well, they would miss out. And so we found the elderly tend to miss out or misunderstand verbally asked questions from robots in our experiment. And that's the roots of this discrepancy between the two versions. So the lesson learned here is that when we use asynchronous test questions, we have to make them short and easy to understand for everyone. And although we test this idea using a physical robot, but it can be used by other conversational agents. And although we test this idea using personality questionnaire, but it has the potential to be used to probe other psychological variables, such as users' values and cognitive abilities. And finally, while the previous study is all about using verbal communication to answer to assess one's personality, but I would like to bring your attention to our another study, which shows the personality, which shows that personalities such as personal resilience can be measured or estimated by smartbands or watches or by acoustic features during human-robot conversations. As a side note, personal resilience is a good predictor of psychological well-being, and these nonverbal estimations are possible because our level of stress are reflected in this heart rate variability and acoustic signals, like how we speak. So we can kind of sense that if this person is nervous or not, or this person is confident or not. Unfortunately, today we don't have much time to go through the details of this study, so I'll leave it here and then move on to the third topic, which is about emotion. Emotion is a very odd but still very interesting topic. And in the literature of emotion recognition, there are two competing theories. One is the discrete theories, and another one is the dimension theories. What does this mean? So so discrete theory usually tells you, okay, we have some basic emotions, for example, like happy and fear or disgust or surprise or these kind of basic emotions. So emotions are kind of category and discrete from each other. And the dimensional theory tells us that different emotions can be organized. Say, for example, in this 2D space. And then one dimension is the valence, and then the other dimension is the arousal. And basically, different emotions vary continuously, throughout the whole space. So one is more kind of continuous varying, and the other one is more discrete. And some evidence indicate that both theories are correct. So later behavior and brain studies try to visualize these different emotions or emotional words in a 2D space like this. And in this semantic space, emotional words that occur more often together will be closer to each other. And as we can see from this plot, there are indeed some different discrete clusters indicated by different colors. So there are different discrete clusters. And, but more importantly, there are smooth transitions or gradients connecting different clusters. So these emotions are both discrete and also kind of continuous at the same time. So both theories are correct. But I would like to argue that both theories are also wrong. Let's take a surprise birthday party as an example. So in a surprise birthday party, one may be surprised and happy at the same time, right? So, but when you take a classification approach, a machine learner is forced to output only one particular emotion category, either happy or surprise. No wonder we always get some non-zero results in the off diagonal of a confusion matrix. And but the incorrectness of this theory does not imply the correctness of another theory, which is the dimensional theory. Because in this particular theory, emotions can be either positive or negative, but not positive and negative at the same time. However, check out the case here. This is the gold medal winner, Guo Xinchun, from 2020 Tokyo Olympics. And how did she feel at that time, at that moment? If you apply a machine learner to do this emotion recognition, the machines will tell you, okay, she is crying, so she is probably sad. But for human participants or for human raters, she is happy, she is just winning, right? And so this is the example of mixed emotions. So she was happy and sad at the same time. And you say, sad? Yeah, there is a word called bittersweeter in English. Bittersweeter means that meaning at once happy and sad. Yeah. And you may argue that, oh, maybe we don't have mixed emotions or have these emotions kind of simultaneously. Maybe they are just alternating, from positive to negative and then positive to negative. But because we don't have the temporal resolution to kind of realize they are alternating, so it feels like we have both emotions at the same time. But actually, later studies found that machine learners can identify or can recognize mixed emotional facial expressions. And so, for example, there are kind of different mixed emotions represented or captured in static images. So these are further evidence that we do have mixed emotions. And okay, now what? Given that we have given the existence of mixed emotions, can we train a model to recognize these mixed emotions? And if we have training data So I would argue that if we have a lot of training data about emotion intensities, then we can probably do the following. So for a facial expression, if we can kind of estimate the intensity of each emotion, then no matter, regardless of the complex combinations of mixed emotion, we can kind of recognize these kind of mixed emotions without retrain the whole classification model. However, the problem is that we don't have this kind of, or we only have very few data sets that have emotion intensity annotations. So in our paper, we present the idea that probably we can use some data augmentation techniques to construct data sets with intensities of facial emotions, such that we have more data to train a model to be more sensitive to mixed emotions. And the idea goes like this. It's very simple. So here the X and Y, X means face, Y means emotion intensity. And if we have just a little bit data to train this machine learner for each basic emotion, for example, like happiness, how happy this person is right now. And this is basically a regression problem, but we only have a little bit data. And however, if we are able to kind of augment the training data and to have more data like this, and then perhaps because the machine learner is more experienced and then would be more sensitive to estimate mixed emotions or emotional intensity. But how do we do this? The idea is to use computer graph techniques called morphing. So for example, if we, in the data set, if we have a neutral face of a person like this, and then this person may probably have different kind of emotional expressions like this. And then we can apply morphing techniques to generate these existing data or facial expressions. And these faces are the new X here. And then for the new Ys, basically, if we have this original data of Y, we can just do a very simple linear interpolation to construct this augmented Y, such that we have pairs of X and Y all augmented to train a machine classifier. And later, we did a human validation to test out if the interpolation of Ys did work. And we also did a machine validation to see if a machine with augmented data would perform better than the machine without augmented data. And the results are pretty good for both human validation and so for human validations, as we can see, if we increase the morphine level, and indeed human participants perceive a stronger emotional intensity in a facial expression for all kinds of emotions. And for machine validations, indeed, machines with the augmented training data would perform would also perform very, very good. Okay, so I probably don't have time to go through another study, but this is what I want to share today. So just to summarize very quickly, so in the first part, I provide some evidence showing that like ChatGPT sometimes will provide incorrect information. And although you will see some small words in the interface of ChatGPT telling you that, okay, ChatGPT may provide incorrect information, but those kind of warning is useless. And secondly, we see that personality as an example can be estimated from verbal signals or nonverbal signals. For verbal signals, we can kind of spread out or take questions from psychological tests and then kind of asynchronously administer a test to efficiently understand another person. It's like a semi-structured interview. And also the nonverbal signals, including our body languages, consist of a lot of social information. And finally, emotion is a complex entity. And the existence of mixed emotions are like elephant in the room, usually neglected in the literature of emotion recognition and applications. So we need to acknowledge the existence of it, and then try to recognize the mixed emotions in reality. Okay, this is it for today. Thank you very much.